I was standing in my own living room, honey, looking down at my daughter Sarah with my mouth hanging open like I've just seen a ghost. And when she pointed at my 30-year-old burgundy couch and said those words that would change everything between us forever. Mom, you don't need the couch anymore. The floor is fine for someone your age.
Y'all, I couldn't believe what I was hearing with my own two ears. This was the same couch where I'd rocked her to sleep during those colicky nights, where we'd watch Saturday morning cartoons together, where her daddy and I had spent countless evenings planning our family's future before cancer took him away 5 years ago. My voice caught in my throat like a fishbone when I tried to respond. Sarah, sweetie, what do you mean the floor is fine? But she was already moving around my living room like she owned the place, pointing at my recliner, my coffee table, everything I'd worked 42 years at the textile mill to afford. We need to make space for the new baby's playpen, she announced, not even looking at me. And honestly, Mom, you spend most of your time in bed anyway since you retired. Let me tell you something, honey. I may be 72 years old, but I'm nowhere near ready to be put out to pasture like some old farm animal. My shoulders just dropped like I was carrying the world when I realized my own daughter saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience, taking up space in what used to be my house. You see, after Harold passed, Sarah convinced me to add her name to the deed, just in case something happens to you, Mom. I thought I was being responsible, planning ahead. Turned out I was signing my independence away with a ballpoint pen. The silence stretched between us like a canyon while I watched her measure my living room with her phone app, calculating how much of my life she could pack away. The couch can go to Goodwill, she muttered, making notes. Same with that old recliner. We'll keep the TV, obviously, but everything else is just clutter. Clutter. She called 40 years of memories clutter, y'all. I felt all the air leave my lungs at once. Now, before I tell you what happened next, and honey, this part is going to absolutely shock you. If you're loving this story, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. You know I get so excited when I see y'all in the comments. Speaking of which, what state are you calling home right now? Drop it down below. And sweetie, tell me, have you ever had family treat you like you didn't matter? Because your stories help me know I'm not alone in this crazy world. Now, let me tell you what I discovered next, because what they did was about to backfire in the most beautiful way. That evening, after Sarah left with her measuring tape and her grand plans, I found myself sitting on that condemned couch, running my weathered hands over the worn fabric where Harold used to rest his head during his chemo treatments. You know what? I let out the longest breath you ever heard and made a decision that would change everything. If Sarah thought the floor was good enough for her 72-year-old mother, then maybe it was time to show her exactly what that looked like. The next morning, I called Jackson's Furniture Consignment downtown. I've got a burgundy sectional sofa, barely used, looking for a good home, I told Martha Jackson, who'd been buying and selling furniture in our little Tennessee town longer than Sarah had been breathing. Martha's voice got real soft on the other end of the line. Oh, honey, is this one of those situations? She'd seen it all over the years, adult children cleaning out their parents' homes like they were already dead. You bring that couch on down here, Beverly. I'll make sure it goes to someone who would appreciate what it means. Y'all, I couldn't believe what happened next. When I told Sarah I had sold the couch, her face lit up like Christmas morning. Oh, Mom, that's perfect. I'll transfer the money to my account to help with the baby expenses. She assumed I'd just hand over the cash like some kind of allowance. The words came out sharper than I meant them to when I said, actually, sweetie, I already spent the money on something I needed. Her smile vanished faster than morning dew. On what? Mom, you don't need anything. I handle all your shopping now. She was right about that part. Over the past 2 years, Sarah had slowly taken over every aspect of my life, claiming it was easier if she managed my errands, my appointments, my social calendar. What I didn't realize was how isolated I'd become until I found myself sitting on my living room floor that first night, eating dinner off a TV tray because there was nowhere else to sit. But honey, they had absolutely no idea what Mama was about to do next. You could hear the mischief just dancing in my voice when I told Sarah I bought myself a rocking chair. The look of confusion on her face was worth every penny of that transaction. A rocking chair? Mom, we agreed you don't need furniture anymore. The baby needs that space. Well, darling, I said, settling into my brand new oak rocking chair that I'd positioned right in the center of where my couch used to be. I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on this one. The chair creaked gently as I rocked back and forth, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had some control in my own home. Sarah's husband, Mike, walked in about that time, took one look at me rocking in the middle of the empty living room and started laughing. Beverly's got herself a thinking chair, he chuckled, but there was something in his eyes that looked almost proud. Every wise woman needs a good thinking chair. Sarah shot him a look that could have melted steel, but Mike just shrugged. What? It's her house. That night, alone in my thinking chair, I started remembering things, like how Sarah had convinced me to cancel my weekly bridge club because you don't need to be driving in the dark, Mom. How she had taken over my grocery shopping because you're buying too much, Mom, it's wasteful. How she had moved my medications to her house because this way I can make sure you're taking them properly. My voice broke in half, y'all, when I realized how systematically she'd been erasing my independence. I could feel those tears starting to sting as I rocked back and forth, thinking about Harold and what he'd say if he could see what our little girl had become. Beth, he'd probably whisper in that gentle way of his. Our little girl forgot who raised her to be strong. The words came out between little sobs as I promised his memory that I wouldn't let Sarah turn me into a ghost in my own life. But, sweetie, that rocking chair was just the beginning of my education. Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention to things I'd been too trusting to notice before, like how Sarah had a key to my house, but I didn't have one to hers, how she knew exactly when my Social Security checks arrived each month, how she'd become real interested in my finances around the time she and Mike started talking about upgrading to a big house. The morning everything changed started like any other. I was rocking in my chair, watching the sunrise through my living room window when I heard Sarah's key in the front door. She had gotten to the habit of letting herself in whenever she pleased, usually with some excuse about checking on Mom. But this time, honey, I heard her whispering to someone on the phone in my kitchen.
"No, she won't be a problem much longer," she was saying, her voice barely carrying to where I sat frozen in my rocking chair. "The dementia is getting worse. Yesterday, she couldn't remember where she put her couch." My blood ran cold as I realized she was talking about me. And worse, she was lying. There was nothing wrong with my memory. She just convinced me to sell my furniture. You know what? I stopped talking for a hot minute and just listened to my own daughter plot against me in my own kitchen. "The power of attorney paperwork should be ready next week," she continued. "Once that's signed, we can move forward with the house sale. She'll be much happier in assisted living where she can get proper care." Honey, my voice caught with pure shock when I realized what was happening. Sarah wasn't just taking over my life. She was stealing it, piece by piece, lie by lie. I could barely get the words out, y'all, when I whispered to myself, "She's been planning this all along." The rocking chair creaked as I gripped the armrest so tight my knuckles went white. I managed to slip out the back door while she was still on her phone call, my heart pounding like a teenager sneaking out after curfew. Martha Jackson at the furniture store had become something of a friend over the past few weeks, and I knew she opened early for coffee with the delivery drivers. When I knocked on her back door at 7:30 in the morning, still in my bathrobe and slippers, she took one look at my face and pulled me inside. "Beverly, honey, what's wrong?" Martha asked, guiding me to a chair in her little office behind the showroom. My voice was dripping with all that irony when I told her, Turns out my daughter thinks I have dementia. She's planning to have me declared incompetent so she can sell my house and put me in a nursing home." Martha's coffee cup hit her desk with a sharp clink. "Over my dead body," she said, and I could hear 40 years of Tennessee determination in those 4 words. "Beverly, do you trust me?" When I nodded, she picked up her phone and dialed a number from memory. "Bobby, it's Martha Jackson. I need you to come down to the store right now. We've got ourselves a situation." Bobby turned out to be Robert Mitchell, Martha's nephew, who just passed the bar exam and was looking to build his practice with cases that mattered. Y'all, I couldn't believe what I was seeing with my own 2 eyes when this young man, couldn't have been more than 28 years old, sat down across from me and said, "Mrs. Beverly, tell me everything and don't leave out a single detail." The words just tumbled out faster than I could think. About Harold's death, about adding Sarah to the deed, about the gradual erosion of my independence, about the phone call I'd overheard that morning. Bobby took notes on a legal pad, asking questions that made me realize just how carefully Sarah had been orchestrating this takeover. "Mrs. Beverly," he said when I finished, "what you're describing is elder financial abuse. It's more common than people think, and unfortunately, adult children are often the perpetrators." He looked up from his notes with kind eyes that reminded me of Harold's. "The good news is you're completely competent. You caught it early, and we can stop this before any permanent damage is done." My voice took on this knowing, satisfied quality when I asked, "So what do we do next?" Bobby smiled and said something that made my heart sing. "We're going to show your daughter that underestimating you was the biggest mistake she ever made." The plan Bobby outlined was beautiful in its simplicity. Since I was still legally competent and the house was still in my name, along with Sarah's, I could make changes to protect myself without anyone else's permission. First, we'd remove Sarah from the deed. Second, we'd set up a trust to protect my assets. Third, we'd document everything Sarah had been doing in case we needed to pursue legal action later. But honey, the sweetest part of the plan was what Bobby called the educational component. Instead of just cutting Sarah off and wondering if she learned anything, we were going to give her a chance to understand exactly what she'd been doing to me and exactly what it felt like to be on the receiving end. That afternoon, I sat in my rocking chair waiting for Sarah to come for her usual check-in. You could hear the mischief dancing in my tone when she walked in and asked, "Mom, where were you this morning? I came by and you weren't here." "Oh, I was just running some errands, sweetie. Had some paperwork to take care of." She didn't think anything of it. After all, in her mind, I was just a confused old lady who couldn't be trusted with important decisions. Over the next week, I started implementing Bobby's suggestions. I changed the locks on my house, opened a new bank account that Sarah didn't know about, and most importantly, I started rebuilding my independence. I rejoined my bridge club. I scheduled my own doctor's appointments. I even bought groceries without asking permission. Sarah noticed the changes immediately. "Mom, you seem different lately," she said during one of her unannounced visits, trying the front door handle and finding it locked for the first time in 2 years. When I let her in, she looked around suspiciously. "And why did you change the locks? I've been worried about you." "Sweetie," I found myself whispering like someone might overhear when I said, "I've been doing some thinking in my rocking chair, and I realized I've been letting other people make too many decisions for myself." The words came out softer than a church mouse, but there was steel underneath them that Sarah definitely heard. "What kind of decisions?" she asked, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. Was I becoming suspicious of her plans? Had someone been talking to me? Y'all, a little smile crept into my voice when I answered, "Oh, just household things, darling, like who gets to come and go in my house, when I eat my meals, whether I need furniture or not." I continued rocking, the steady creak, 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 filling the silence that stretched between us. Sarah's face was starting to show the first signs of panic. "Mom, you're worrying me. Have you been talking to strangers? You know you can't trust people who might try to take advantage of you." The irony was thick. You could cut it with a knife, honey. Here she was warning me about people who might take advantage of me while she'd been planning to do exactly that. But the real turning point came the following Tuesday. Sarah had been trying to reach me all morning. Apparently, she had an appointment with a lawyer to finalize those power of attorney papers she mentioned on her phone call. When she finally came by the house around noon, she found me in my rocking chair reading what looked like official documents. "What's that, Mom?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual, but I could hear the strain underneath. My voice was pure excitement, honey, when I looked up at her and said, "Oh, just some legal papers Bobby Mitchell helped me with. You remember Bobby, Martha Jackson's nephew? He's a lawyer now." I watched Sarah's face go pale as I continued. "He's been helping me understand some things about my rights as a homeowner and a senior citizen." "Your rights?" Sarah's voice cracked like thin ice. "Mom, what are you talking about? What kind of rights?" I set the papers down in my lap and looked at my daughter, really looked at her for the first time in months. "Well, sweetie, apparently I have the right to remove people from my property deed if I feel they might not have my best interests at heart. I have the right to control who has access to my home. And I have the right to make my own medical and financial decisions as long as I'm mentally competent." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stared at me like she'd never seen me before. And in a way, I guess she hadn't. For 2 years, she'd been seeing a weak, confused old woman who needed to be managed. Now she was looking at Beverly Morrison, the woman who'd raised her to be strong and independent, the woman who'd worked double shifts at the textile mill to pay for her college education. "Mom," Sarah said slowly, "I think there's been some misunderstanding. Everything I've been doing is to help you, to protect you." I couldn't help but let out this bitter little laugh. "Protect me from what, darling? From living in my own house? From making my own choices? From having furniture to sit on?" I stood up from my rocking chair, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was looking down at my daughter instead of up at her. "Sarah, honey, I heard your phone call last Tuesday morning. I know about the power of attorney papers. I know about your plans to sell my house and put me in assisted living. I know about you telling people I have dementia." My voice broke right in half, y'all, but this time it was from anger, not sadness. The look on Sarah's face went from confusion to panic to something that looked almost like shame. "Mom, I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can explain," I said, my voice taking on that tone every mother develops when their child has been caught in a lie. "You can probably explain how stealing someone's independence is actually helping them. You can probably explain how lying about someone's mental health is actually protecting them. You can probably explain how planning to take someone's home away is actually looking out for their best interests." Sarah started crying then, not the pretty, delicate tears of a movie actress, but the ugly, desperate sighs of someone who knows they've been caught doing something terrible. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. After Dad died, I was so scared something would happen to you. I thought if I could control everything, I could keep you safe." The words came out between little sobs as she continued. "And then Mike lost his job, and we found out about the baby, and the money was so tight, and I saw how much equity was in your house, and I thought maybe it would be better for everyone if If you could convince me I was incompetent and steal my home to solve your financial problems, I finished for her. Sweetie, that's not protection. That's not love. That's theft. I sat back down in my rocking chair and looked at my daughter, really seeing her for the first time in months. She looked exhausted, desperate, caught between her love for me and her own problems. My heart broke for her, but it broke for me too, for all the time I'd lost doubting myself, for all the independence I'd given up without a fight. Sarah, I said gently, your daddy and I raised you to be better than this. We taught you to ask for help when you need it, not to take what isn't yours. We showed you that family takes care of each other, but that doesn't mean family controls each other. She was still crying, her mascara running down her cheeks like rain on a window. I don't know how to fix this, Mom. I don't know how to make it right. Honey, my voice caught with pure emotion when I realized this was the moment I'd been preparing for without knowing it. All those hours in my rocking chair, all that thinking and planning and gathering strength, it had all been leading to this conversation. Well, darling, you can start by telling me the truth about your financial situation, all of it. And then we can figure out how to help each other without anyone losing their dignity or their rights. What came out over the next 2 hours was a story I should have seen coming if I hadn't been so consumed with grief over Harold's death. Mike had indeed lost his job, but it had been over a year ago, not recently. They'd been living on credit cards and hope, too proud to ask for help, too scared to admit how bad things had gotten. When Sarah found out she was pregnant, the panic had set in. I looked at your house, and I saw a solution to all our problems. A house that was too big for one person, a mother who seemed to be withdrawing from the world anyway. I convinced myself that you'd be happier with less responsibility, that assisted living might actually be good for you. Y'all, I could barely whisper those words out loud when I said, and you convinced yourself that lying about my mental state was justified if it solved your money problems. She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. But here's the thing, honey. When someone you love hurts you this deeply, you have two choices. You can cut them out of your life completely, or you can find a way to heal that teaches both of you something important. I chose healing, but not the kind that just sweeps everything under the rug and pretends it never happened. Sarah, I said, I'm going to help you and Mike get back on your feet, but we're going to do it the right way, with honesty and respect and clear boundaries. I pulled out the paperwork Bobby had prepared, not just the documents protecting my assets, but a family loan agreement he'd drawn up at my request. I'm prepared to lend you and Mike enough money to get caught up on their bills and carry you through until he finds steady work again. But this is a loan, not a gift, and it comes with conditions. Her eyes widened as she read through the terms Bobby and I had worked out. The loan would be interest-free and have reasonable repayment terms, but it required complete financial transparency from both Sarah and Mike. They would have to attend financial counseling sessions. Most importantly, Sarah would have to publicly acknowledge what she'd done and apologize not just to me, but to our extended family and friends who she'd been telling about my supposed mental decline. You want me to tell everyone that I lied about you having dementia? She asked, her voice small and ashamed. Sweetie, I want you to tell everyone the truth, because lies have consequences, and part of making this right is undoing the damage those lies might have caused. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of both our lives. Sarah had to make phone calls to family members, explaining that she'd been exaggerating my condition because of her own stress and financial problems. She had to tell my doctor that I didn't actually need the memory assessments she'd been requesting. She had to admit to her friends at church that my mother was perfectly capable of living independently. But honey, watching my daughter take responsibility for what she'd done, really take responsibility, not just apologize and hope it would blow over, That's when I started to see the woman Harold and I had actually raised. It was still in there, underneath all the desperation and poor choices. The most emotional moment came about a month later when Sarah and Mike came over for dinner. I'd cooked pot roast in my slow cooker, the first real family dinner I had made since Harold died. We sat around my kitchen table, the same table where I fed Sarah thousands of meals when she was growing up.
"Mom," Sarah said, putting down her fork and looking directly at me, "I need you to know something. When I was trying to convince myself that taking over your life was the right thing to do, I told myself that you weren't really living anyway, that you were just existing, waiting to die." The words came out between little sobs as she continued, "But these past few weeks, watching you in that rocking chair, seeing you take charge of your life again, seeing you help us, even after what I did, I realized you weren't the one who wasn't really living. I was. I'd gotten so caught up in trying to control everything that I forgot how to actually live." Y'all, I couldn't stop laughing when I remembered something Harold used to say during the tough times when Sarah was a teenager testing boundaries. "That girl's gotta make her own mistakes," he'd tell me when I wanted to fix everything for her. "Sometimes the best thing we can do for the people we love is let them fail, and then help them figure out how to get back up." My voice was pure joy, honey, when I told Sarah, "Your daddy always said that the measure of a person isn't whether they make mistakes, it's what they do after they realize they made them." I reached across the table and took her hand. "And you, my darling daughter, are measuring up just fine." But the story doesn't end there, sweetie, because life has a way of testing the lessons we think we've learned. About 6 months later, Sarah called me one evening, her voice tight with stress. "Mom, Mike got a job offer in Colorado. It's a really good opportunity, but it would mean moving halfway across the country." My first instinct was the old Beverly, the one who might have panicked at the thought of my daughter living so far away, who might have tried to convince her to stay close to home. But then I looked over at my rocking chair, the same chair that had become my thinking place, my strength place, my independence place, and I smiled. "Sarah, honey, that's wonderful news," I said, and I meant it. "When do they want you to start?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You're not gonna try to talk me out of it? You're not worried about being here alone?" You could hear the mischief just dancing in my voice when I answered, "Sweetie, I've been alone before, and I've been controlled before. I can tell you which one I prefer." I could hear her laughing on the other end of the line, not the desperate, guilty laugh of someone caught in a lie, but the genuine laughter of a daughter who finally understood that her mother was gonna be fine. The day before Sarah and Mike moved to Colorado, she came over to help me rearrange my living room. I bought a new couch, nothing fancy, just a comfortable sectional where I could stretch out and read or watch TV. But I kept my rocking chair right in the center of the room because some lessons are too important to forget. "Sarah, Mom, I need to ask you something and I want you to be honest with me." She sat down in my rocking chair, the first time anyone else had ever sat in it. "Do you forgive me? I mean, really, truly forgive me." I settled onto my new couch and looked at my daughter, this woman who'd caused me so much pain, but who'd also given me the opportunity to rediscover my own strength. "Honey, forgiveness isn't something you earn by being perfect after you make a mistake. Forgiveness is something you accept when you're ready to do better." The words came out softer than a church mouse when I continued. "But more importantly, Sarah, I need you to forgive yourself. What you did was wrong, but who you are, the woman sitting in my rocking chair right now, she's someone I'm proud to call my daughter." Y'all, I could feel those tears starting to sting, but they were good tears this time, healing tears. Besides, I added with a grin, if you hadn't made me get rid of my old couch, I never would have discovered how much I love this rocking chair. Sometimes the worst mistakes lead to the best discoveries. That night, after Sarah left for Colorado, I sat in my rocking chair one more time before bed, thinking about everything that had happened since that day she told me the floor was fine for someone my age. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. It felt like mine. I thought about Harold and what he'd say if he could see me now. "Biv, look at you, rocking like the queen of your own castle." And honey, that's exactly what I was doing, ruling my own little kingdom with wisdom earned through heartbreak and strength discovered through necessity. The months that followed brought their own challenges and joys. Sarah sent pictures from Colorado, the beautiful mountain views from their new apartment, Mike in his new uniform at the aerospace company where he'd found work, ultrasound photos of my future grandchild. We talked every Sunday, and slowly, carefully, we rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of honesty and respect. I joined a senior center book club and discovered I had opinions about literature I never bothered to explore before. I started volunteer work at the local food bank, using my hands and my heart in ways that reminded me I still had plenty to offer the world. And every evening, I'd come home to my rocking chair and my couch and my house that belonged to me and nobody else. But the most important discovery came one evening about 8 months later when I was rocking and reading and I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through my window, I saw a young woman about Sarah's age helping an elderly man with a walker make his way up my front steps. When I opened the door, the young woman looked embarrassed. She said, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but we're lost. My GPS isn't working, and my grandfather needs to sit down for a few minutes. He's been in the hospital, and the drive is harder than we thought it would be." Without hesitation, I opened my door wide. "Of course, honey, come on in. I've got a comfortable couch and some sweet tea in the refrigerator." As I helped the elderly gentleman to my couch and brought them both something to drink, I listened to their story. The young woman, Jessica, was taking her grandfather home from the hospital after a fall. His adult children lived in other states and were pressuring him to move to assisted living, but he wanted to try living independently a little longer. "I'm the only one who thinks he can do it," Jessica confided while her grandfather rested. "Everyone else thinks I'm being naive." Y'all, my voice caught with pure understanding when I said, "Jessica, honey, let me tell you something. Sometimes the people who love us most can make the biggest mistakes about what we need." I sat down in my rocking chair and told them a shortened version of my story with Sarah about being underestimated, about fighting for independence, about the difference between helping someone and controlling them. The grandfather, whose name was Frank, listened with eyes that grew brighter with every word. "You mean I'm not crazy for wanting to stay in my own home?" he asked. "Frank, darling, wanting to maintain your independence isn't crazy. It's human. The crazy thing is when people think taking away your choices is the same as taking care of you." Before they left that evening, I gave Jessica my phone number and Bobby Mitchell's contact information. If you need resources or legal advice about protecting your grandfather's rights, Bobby is your man. And if either of you ever need to talk to someone who's been where you are, I'm just a phone call away.
Over the following months, I became something I'd never expected to be, an advocate for senior rights in my community. Frank and Jessica connected me with other families dealing with similar issues. I started attending city council meetings about aging in place resources. I even gave a talk at the senior center about recognizing elder financial abuse. But most importantly, I became a living example of what it looks like to fight for your own dignity and win. Every morning when I woke up in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by furniture I'd chosen, I was proof that being older doesn't mean being powerless. The first anniversary of Couch Day, that's what I'd started calling it, arrived on a Tuesday morning in October. Sarah called from Colorado, her voice excited. "Mom, I have news. The baby kicked for the first time yesterday, and we found out it's a girl." Mike and I were wondering, would you consider coming to Colorado for the birth? My voice was pure excitement, honey, when I answered, Sweetie, I would be honored to meet my granddaughter. But then I paused, looking around my living room, at my rocking chair, at my couch, at my home. As long as we're clear that I'm coming as a visitor, not as someone who needs to be managed. Sarah's laugh was music to my ears. Mom, I think those days are long behind us. Besides, I have a feeling you're going to teach our daughter the same lessons you taught me, how to be strong, how to stand up for herself, and how to rock her way through whatever life throws at her. Y'all, I couldn't stop smiling when I realized that the rocking chair I'd bought in defiance had become a symbol of so much more than resistance. It had become a throne of wisdom, a place of strength, a reminder that sometimes the best response to being knocked down is to find your balance and keep moving forward. That evening, I sat in my rocking chair with a cup of tea and a photo album full of pictures from Sarah's childhood. There was one picture in particular that caught my attention. Sarah, at about 8 years old, sitting in Harold's old recliner, which had been donated to Goodwill years before this whole mess started, reading a book that was almost as big as she was. Looking at that picture, I realized something profound. The furniture had never been the real issue. The couch, the recliner, the rocking chair, they were all just symbols of something deeper. The real issue had been about respect, about dignity, about the right to make choices about your own life. When Sarah had said, the floor is fine for someone your age, she hadn't just been talking about where I should sit. She had been saying that my comfort didn't matter, that my preferences were irrelevant, that my opinion about my own life was worth less than her convenience. The rocking chair hadn't just given me a place to sit, it had given me a place to stand, metaphorically speaking. As I rocked gently back and forth, I thought about all the women my age who might be facing similar situations. How many were sitting on floors, literally or figuratively, because someone had convinced them they didn't deserve better? How many had given up their rocking chairs, their independence, their voices, because someone they trusted told them it was for their own good? The phone rang around 9 o'clock, interrupting my reflection. It was Martha Jackson from the furniture store. Beverly, honey, I hope I'm not calling too late, but I wanted to let you know, that couch you sold me, it went to a young military family who'd been sleeping on air mattresses for months. The wife called today crying, thanking me for making it affordable for them. My voice broke right in half, y'all, but in the best way possible. When I realized that my old couch, the one where I rocked Sarah to sleep, where Harold and I had planned our future, was now holding a new family together. Martha, that's the most beautiful thing you could have told me. But that's not why I called. I called because that young wife said something that reminded me of you. She said, this couch isn't just furniture, it's hope. It's proof that we're going to be okay. And I thought, that's exactly what your rocking chair is for you, isn't it? It's your proof that you're going to be okay. Honey, my voice was pure joy when I answered, Martha, it's more than that. It's proof that I'm still here, still fighting, still worthy of comfort and respect. After we hung up, I continued rocking, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The woman who had sold her couch in defeat was gone, replaced by someone who understood that dignity isn't something you can lose, it's something you choose to claim every single day. 3 weeks later, I received a package in the mail with a Colorado address. Inside was a small wooden plaque that Sarah had made in a craft class, engraved with the words, "For the strongest woman I know, may your rocking chair always remind you of your power. Love, Sarah." But the real surprise came with a letter tucked underneath the plaque. In Sarah's careful handwriting, it read, Mom, I've been thinking about what you said about furniture being symbols. I realize now that when I told you the floor was fine, I was really saying that you weren't fine, that you weren't worth consideration or comfort or choice. I was wrong about so many things, but I was most wrong about not seeing that you were still the same woman who raised me to never settle for less than I deserve. Thank you for showing me that strength isn't about controlling other people. It's about refusing to let other people control you. P.S. I'm buying a rocking chair for the baby's room. I want her to learn early on that every woman needs a place to think and rock and remember her own power. Y'all, I let out the longest sigh you ever heard. Not from sadness this time, but from pure satisfaction. Finally, and I mean finally, my daughter understood not just what she had done wrong, but why it had been wrong and how to do better. The winter months passed peacefully. I hosted Thanksgiving for the first time since Harold died, cooking for Frank and Jessica, Martha Jackson and her husband, Bobby Mitchell, and his young family, and several other friends I'd made through my advocacy work. My dining room table was full, my house was full of laughter, and my rocking chair served as the unofficial headquarters for after-dinner conversation. Beverly, Frank said as he settled into my couch after our meal, I need to thank you for something. When we met 8 months ago, I was ready to give up and let my kids put me away somewhere. But watching you fight for your independence inspired me to fight for mine. I'm still in my own home, still making my own decisions, and it's because you showed me it was possible. My voice took on this knowing, satisfied quality when I replied, Frank, honey, you didn't need me to show you it was possible. You just needed someone to remind you that you were worth fighting for. I looked around my living room at all the people there, people who had come into my life because I'd chosen to fight rather than surrender. Sometimes the best thing we can do for each other is refuse to give up. When other people see us standing strong, it gives them permission to stand strong too. Christmas Eve brought the phone call I'd been anticipating for weeks. Sarah's voice was breathless with excitement and exhaustion. Mom, she's here! Emma Rose Morrison arrived at 3:47 this morning and she's perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, and she has Harold's chin. You could hear the joy bubbling up in my voice when I said, Sweetie, I am so proud of you. How are you feeling? Tired, happy, and Sarah paused. And when she continued, her voice was soft with emotion. Grateful, Mom. Grateful that my daughter is going to grow up knowing her grandmother as the strong, independent woman she really is, not the confused old lady I tried to turn you into. 2 days after Christmas, I boarded my first airplane in over 15 years, bound for Colorado to meet my granddaughter. As the plane lifted off from Nashville, I looked down at the city where I'd lived my entire life, where I'd loved and lost and learned and grown. But I wasn't looking back with regret. I was looking forward to the adventure ahead. Sarah and Mike met me at the Denver airport, and honey, the moment I saw my daughter's face, I knew everything between us had truly healed. She looked radiant despite her exhaustion, confident in her new role as a mother, and genuinely happy to see me. Mom, she said as she hugged me tight, I have something to show you when we get home. The drive to their apartment was filled with chatter about the baby, about Mike's new job, about their plans for the future. But when we walked into their living room, I stopped dead in my tracks. There, positioned next to the window with a view of the Rocky Mountains, was a beautiful oak rocking chair, nearly identical to the one in my living room back in Tennessee. And in that chair, rocking gently, was Mike, holding the tiniest, most perfect baby girl I'd ever seen. Y'all, I couldn't believe what I was seeing with my own 2 eyes. My voice was pure amazement when I whispered, She's beautiful. But it was more than Emma's perfect little face that took my breath away. It was the sight of that rocking chair, the symbol of everything we learned and overcome. "Mom," Sarah said, guiding me to sit in the chair and placing Emma in my arms, "I want Emma to grow up understanding that rocking chairs aren't just furniture. They're thinking places, strength places, places where women figure out who they are and what they're worth." As I held my granddaughter and rocked back and forth, looking out at those majestic mountains, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. Not the peace of resignation or defeat, but the peace of a battle fought and won, of dignity reclaimed, of love restored to its proper foundation of respect. Emma Rose opened her tiny eyes and looked right at me, and I swear, honey, it was like she could see straight into my soul. "Hello, precious girl," I whispered to her. "Your grandmother has some stories to tell you about rocking chairs and standing up for yourself. But right now, let's just rock together and watch the world wake up." The week I spent in Colorado was magical. I helped with feedings and diaper changes, shared stories about Sarah's childhood, and spent hours in that rocking chair with Emma, telling her about her grandfather Harold, about the importance of family, and about the difference between being loved and being controlled. On my last night there, after Emma had fallen asleep and Mike had gone to bed, Sarah and I sat together in their living room. She on the couch, me on the rocking chair, both of us watching the baby sleep in her bassinet. "Mom," Sarah said quietly, "I need to tell you something I've never said before. When Dad died, I was so scared of losing you too that I tried to wrap you up in bubble wrap. I thought if I could control every aspect of your life, I could protect you from everything that might hurt you." She paused, wiping away tears that caught the soft lamplight. "But what I really did was try to kill the part of you that made you who you are, your independence, your strength, your right to choose your own path. I almost destroyed the mother who taught me to be strong by trying to keep her from being strong." My voice broke right in half, y'all, when I said, "Sarah, honey, we can't protect the people we love from life. All we can do is love them enough to let them live it. I know that now, and I promise you I'm going to raise Emma to understand that being loved doesn't mean having your choices taken away. I'm going to teach her that needing help sometimes doesn't mean giving up control of your life." The words came out between little sobs of joy when I replied, "And I'm going to be here to remind both of you that rocking chairs are for thinking, not just for soothing babies to sleep." The flight home to Tennessee was bittersweet. I was sad to leave Emma and the kids, but excited to return to my own life, my own home, my own rocking chair. As the plane descended into Nashville, I looked out the window at the familiar landscape and felt something I'd never quite experienced before: the deep satisfaction of someone who had gone away and come back changed for the better. Martha Jackson picked me up at the airport, eager to hear about my trip and to catch me up on the local news. "Beverly, you look different," she said as we drove through the city. "Rested, maybe, but more than that, you look complete." Honey, my voice was pure contentment when I answered, "Martha, I think for the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am and exactly what I'm worth. It took losing everything to find out I could never really lose anything that mattered." Back home in my living room, I settled into my rocking chair with a cup of tea and a stack of mail that had accumulated while I was gone. Among the bills and advertisements was a letter from Frank updating me on his continued independence, and a card from Jessica, now in her second year of law school, specializing in elder law. But the most surprising piece of mail was an official-looking envelope from the Tennessee Department of Human Services. Inside was a letter informing me that I had been nominated for the state's Senior Advocate of the Year award, recognizing my work in raising awareness about elder financial abuse and my volunteer efforts at the community center. Y'all, I couldn't stop laughing when I read the nomination letter written by Bobby Mitchell. In it, he described how a woman who had started out as a victim of family financial abuse had transformed herself into a powerful advocate for seniors' rights, all because she'd had the courage to buy a rocking chair and refuse to accept that the floor was good enough. Mrs. Beverly Morrison represents the very best of what it means to age with dignity and strength. She proves every day that being older doesn't mean being powerless, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to disappear. The award ceremony was held on a beautiful spring evening at the state capitol building. Sarah flew in from Colorado for the occasion, bringing Mike and baby Emma with her. As I walked across that stage to accept my award, I looked out at the audience and saw all the faces that had become part of my journey. Martha and Bobby, Frank and Jessica, members of my book club, volunteers from the food bank, and most importantly, my family. But the moment that brought tears to my eyes was when I spotted my rocking chair in the very back of the auditorium. Sarah had somehow arranged to have it brought to the ceremony, complete with a sign that read, "This chair represents the power of refusing to settle for less than you deserve." When it came time for my acceptance speech, I walked to the podium and looked out at the crowd of people who had come to celebrate not just my story, but the stories of all the seniors who refused to be invisible. "Friends," I began, my voice strong and clear. 2 years ago, my daughter told me that I didn't need a couch, that the floor was fine for someone my age. Today, I want to tell you that the floor is never fine. Not for me, not for you, not for anyone who deserves dignity and respect.
The applause that followed was thunderous, but I raised my hand to continue. This award isn't really mine. It belongs to every senior citizen who has ever been told they're too old to matter, too confused to make their own decisions, too much trouble to be treated with kindness. It belongs to every person who has looked at their circumstances and decided to fight rather than surrender. My voice was pure joy, honey, when I concluded, and it belongs to everyone who understands that sometimes the most important furniture in your house isn't a fancy couch or an expensive table. Sometimes it's just a simple rocking chair where you can sit and think and remember that you're worth fighting for. As I left the stage that night, award in hand, I caught sight of myself in a mirror in the hallway. The woman looking back at me was 73 years old, with silver hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of both sorrow and joy. But more than that, she was a woman who knew her worth, who had claimed her space in the world, who had transformed pain into purpose. 6 months later, I received a phone call that would bring my story full circle in the most unexpected way. It was from a woman named Patricia, calling from Oregon. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, "I saw your story online about the rocking chair and standing up to family financial abuse. I'm hoping you can help me. My son has been trying to get me declared incompetent so he can sell my house, and I don't know what to do." You could hear the mischief dancing in my voice when I answered, "Patricia, honey, the first thing you're going to do is find yourself a good rocking chair. The second thing you're going to do is call a lawyer I know named Bobby Mitchell,
I'll give you his number. And the third thing you're going to do is remember that the floor is never, ever fine for someone who deserves better. As we talked, I found myself sharing not just practical advice, but something more valuable. The knowledge that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, never too late to reclaim your dignity, never too late to rock your way back to strength. That conversation led to another and another, until I found myself running an informal network of seniors helping seniors navigate family conflicts and financial abuse. My living room became a meeting place, my rocking chair became a symbol of resistance, and my story became proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Today, as I sit in my rocking chair writing this story, I can look around my living room and see evidence of a life fully lived and wholly owned. There's the couch I chose for myself, the coffee table I picked out because I liked its style, the family photos I arranged because they make me happy. Every stick of furniture in this house represents a choice I made, a preference I honored, a decision I was free to make. But more than that, every piece tells a story of a woman who refused to disappear, who refused to accept that her comfort didn't matter, who refused to believe that being older meant being powerless. Sarah calls every Sunday, and our conversations are filled with laughter, mutual respect, and genuine affection. Emma is walking now, and Sarah sends videos of her toddling around their apartment, always gravitating toward that rocking chair by the window. She loves to rock, she tells me. I think she's going to be strong like her grandmother. Mike got a promotion at work. They've bought their first house, and they're talking about having another baby. But most importantly, they're building their family on a foundation of honesty, respect, and the understanding that love doesn't mean control. Frank still lives independently, with Jessica now graduated from law school and working nearby. He sends me a card every year on the anniversary of our first meeting, always with the same message. Thank you for showing me that dignity is worth fighting for. And Martha Jackson retired and sold the furniture store, but not before making sure I got first pick of a beautiful antique side table that now sits next to my rocking chair, holding my books and my tea and whatever letters arrive from people whose lives have been touched by this story. And Bobby Mitchell? He's built a thriving practice specializing in elder law, protecting seniors from the kind of abuse I experienced, and he still credits our first meeting with teaching him that the law isn't just about rules and regulations. It's about dignity and justice and the fundamental right of every person to control their own life. But the most important outcome of this whole journey isn't measured in awards or recognition or even in the relationships that were healed and strengthened. The most important outcome is the simplest one. I wake up every morning in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by my own choices, and I know without question that I matter. Every evening, I sit in my rocking chair and rock back and forth, sometimes reading, sometimes thinking, sometimes just enjoying the peaceful rhythm that has become the soundtrack of my reclaimed independence. And every time I rock, I remember the moment when someone I loved told me the floor was good enough for me. And I remember the moment I decided it wasn't. Y'all, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this story,
It's this. You are never too old, never too powerless, never too dependent on others to stand up for your own dignity. Whether your battle is with family members who think they know what's best for you, with systems that treat you as invisible, or with your own inner voice that whispers, you don't deserve better, the fight is worth it. Find your rocking chair, honey. Find that place where you can sit and think and remember who you are and what you're worth. And then rock your way back to strength, back to dignity, back to the life that belongs to you and nobody else. Because the floor is never fine for someone who deserves a place at the table, a voice in the conversation, and a rocking chair of their own. The last rays of evening sunlight are streaming through my living room window now, casting long shadows across my couch, my coffee table, and my rocking chair. In a few minutes, I'll get up and make myself some dinner. Maybe call one of my friends from book club, perhaps work on a letter to another senior who's reached out for advice. But for now, I'm just gonna sit here and rock, listening to the gentle creak, creak, creak that reminds me every day that I chose this chair. I chose this life. I chose to fight for my right to make choices. And tomorrow morning, when I wake up in my own bed, in my own house, I'll come back to this rocking chair with my coffee and my breakfast. And I'll start another day of living life on my own terms. Because that's what strong women do, honey. We rock through the storms, we rock through the challenges, we rock through the pain and the joy and everything in between. And we never, ever settle for the floor when we deserve so much more.